had been reading a book written by famous American geographer Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel. The summary of the book could be a separate subject for a YouTube video, but the idea you catch from the surface going 200 pages into it is that the comparative advantage for the Eurasian empires in comparison to those of the New World came from the early adoption of agricultural practices. These in turn led to developments in technology, especially weapons and sailing, that put them on the historic pedestal. What caught my attention and set me on an intellectual journey of sorts was the part where 200 Spaniards, led by the famous Francisco Pizzaro, conquered an empire that could amass more than 200,000 soldiers. I'm speaking of the Incas, whose dominion stretched from present-day Ecuador to southern Chile, encompassing parts of Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru, the birthplace of the kingdom. But before we dive deep into the intricacies of how and why this happened, let us highlight the historical context of the time. The period we are considering here is 1532. Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince just got published 5 years prior to his death. The same goes for François Rabelais' Pantagruel, a tale of two giants, Gargantua and his son Pantagruel. Spain was ruled by Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, who had no fixed capital city. He spent his life waging numerous wars, the finances for which were borrowed from German and Italian bankers. The loans had to be repaid, and the means of doing that had to be expanded. Everything revolves around money at the end of the day. Additionally, Charles V was constantly bothered about the rising might of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine yourself in his shoes, being approached by the likes of Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizzaro, who promise you a colossal amount of wealth to be gained by venturing out onto the shores of the New World. Without much deliberation, you would signal a green light to them. Moreover, these conquests, in Pizarro's case, were successful only after multiple tries, which indicates that setbacks never deterred the then ruler Charles V. Too much was at stake. Francisco Pizzaro was no king, and even more so an emperor. He was an illegitimate son of a Spanish soldier and a household servant tending the swine as a young boy instead of pursuing an education. Yes, his parents were poor, but even so they left him with something much more valuable. 4 step-brothers, 3 from his father and 1 from his mother, whom he trusted more than anyone. They became the foundation of the conquests which led to Pizarro becoming an ultra-rich person. Their names were Hernando, Juan, Gonzalo, and Francisco. Hernando, for example, was sent twice to Spain with the purpose of delivering the king's commission, or the royal fifth, generated from Pizarro's conquest. The modern estimates for those sums would be hard to grasp. His lieutenants were no less a treasure chest. One of them, Francisco Orellana, is credited by historians as the discoverer of the mighty Amazon River, which is the largest drainage system in the world. All in all, it was what today we would call a dream team. Or would it be fairer to designate them as a band of thugs? Looters whose violent actions led to the destruction of an empire, the largest empire of pre-Columbian America. To comprehend the significance of Pizarro's conquest and the blessings of the goddess Fortuna bestowed on the Spanish expedition, we must shine the light on certain facets of the Inca Empire that crumbled in a matter of 4 decades. Locals called it Tawantinsuyu, which translates to the realm of 4 parts. Like in many other cultures, the Incans worshipped the sun deity and considered their king to be his descendant. As some experts of the field mention, the word Inca itself is a Quechua term for nobility. For those who haven't heard of this language, mind you, it is still spoken by more than 8 million natives of present-day countries located nearby the Andes Mountains. The Inca Empire is one in a string of so-called Andean cultures that began forming around 300 AD. They got the honor of domesticating the llamas, who, as I came to know recently, are the South American cousins of Eurasian camels. These cute animals stick out their tongues if they want to show dislike towards one of their kind and can carry up to 200 pounds on their backs. What's interesting is that if you overload a llama, it basically refuses to move and lies down. Above all, llamas gave highly nutritious milk which had more protein than cow's milk. Irrigation system was quite sophisticated, accompanied by age-old agricultural practices that fed around 12 million people compared to Spain's 8.9 million. The Incan army therefore had 200,000 active men plus the reserves. It was divided into multiple battalions based on ethnicity. Even without the discovery of the wheel, Incas managed to construct sophisticated architectural structures and an array of road channels. The ruler at the helm of the Incas during Francisco's visit was the rebellion crusher Atahualpa. At the age of 13, he aided his father, the then king Huayna Capac, to quell destructive elements in the northern region of their empire. This incident made Atahualpa a prospective candidate in the eyes of the locals. When Mr. Capac, Atahualpa's father, died of smallpox, which came as a bonus alongside all the mayhem brought in by Hernán Cortés a few years before Pizarro, Atahualpa waged a civil war on his brother Huáscar. Huáscar was the one who officially inherited the throne from Capac and gave his brother Atahualpa the mandate to rule the northern province of Quito. During a bloody struggle that ensued, Atahualpa somehow managed to lose his ear when being in captivity, but came forward as the winner in the civil war, the same year when he lost everything to the Spaniards. To reach the maximum possible height and to fall instantly. That's what overconfidence can do to a person, although in his case it was much more complex. Anybody who had an army with more than 200,000 active personnel would never in his wildest dreams believe that his tragic end would come at the hands of 200 people from a country located thousands of kilometers away on another continent. But this is exactly what happened with poor Atahualpa. What was the incident that had shook me personally and as military strategists mesmerized? Well, it is labeled as the ambush at Cajamarca, and from this point onwards till the end of the video, we will discuss the details of this most daring capture in the history of the post-Enlightenment era. Seems to me crucial to remind myself and the viewers of Alexander the Great's quote uttered before the era-altering Battle of Gaugamela. The quote goes, "If Darius dies, the Persian Empire will follow him. If I die in battle, it would be the demise of one Greek soldier." The essence of the Cajamarca battle is encapsulated in this one quote by Alexander. Before we analyze the mistakes committed by the Inca ruler and what Pizarro did right, we must recall the event as it unfolded in 1532. Cajamarca at that time had a structure of a plaza with alleyways running towards it from various directions. These were the main hiding places for the little cavalry and infantry that Pizarro controlled. 200 was the approximate number. Some mention the number 128. The background to the end of Inca Empire was ironically positive. Atahualpa just defeated his brother and was ready to wrest full control over his province. The celebrations were being planned, and the least he cared for was a band of white men encamped a few miles away from his resting place. Atahualpa was even observing a fast. His people treated him like a god, which of course he wasn't. The Battle of Cajamarca will prove it, for once and for all, that overconfidence in one's abilities is a detrimental element of an ambitious character. Let us try and understand, number 1, the mistakes committed by Incas, and number 2, things done right by the Spaniards. Coming to Incas. Number 1, the army was left behind Cajamarca and the meeting with Spaniards was done with a retinue. 80,000 soldiers were frolicking around the provincial city while the empire was being torn to pieces by the Iberians. Number 2, all the elites, including various decision-makers, accompanied Atahualpa. No one was standing guard near the encampment. Number 3, lack of proper reconnaissance conducted by the Incas. As Sun Tzu famously said, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you can win 1,000 battles. Lagging in technology. Number 4, you can't completely put the blame on the Incas for this, but nonetheless, this was one of the reasons for their defeat. Diplomatic roughness. When approached by the Spanish priest whose main aim was to enact a provocation against the religious ideals of the Spaniards, thus motivating them for the attack, Atahualpa rebuffed him harshly. Basically, never do what your enemy wants you to do. If you do it, then do it when he least expects it. Atahualpa failed here also. Coming to the Spaniards. Point number 1. Leadership was well prepared for the battle, and Pizzaro had people that he can trust completely. It wasn't Atahualpa who spread the net. It was Pizzaro. Number 2, the element of surprise. It was an ambush, after all, in every sense of the word. Number 3, speed of attack and decision-making. This once again alludes to the quality of the leader. Number 4, usage of ideological fervor. The provocation done by the priest was successful. Attacking the right aim. Number 5, not any soldier or a group of soldiers, but Atahualpa himself. Crushing. Number 6, the world of Incas by morally destroying them. After all, the king was their god. And last but not the least, technological supremacy. The results of the battle were as surprising and fast as the battle itself. Atahualpa was held hostage, and although he wanted to buy a new lease on his life from Pizzaro by gifting grand amounts of gold and silver, the attempt was out of fear. As Winston Churchill famously said, you can never engage in peaceful negotiations with the lion when your head is in his jaws. Karma, although, comes into play here in a uniquely dramatic way. Pizzaro dies 8 years after the incident, falling victim to a power struggle that shocked Peru in 1941. He is killed not by the Incas, but by his own countrymen. It was his former partner's son who took revenge for the killing of his father by Pizzaro's brother. Pizzaro drew a cross with his blood and fell on the ground. The death of this man changes little in terms of the increasing might of European nations, especially Spain, in the region since that moment. If you have a look at the official languages of various Latin American countries, Spanish is the one being spoken everywhere except for Brazil. The aim of this story isn't at all to eulogize Pizzaro or demean Atahualpa. The purpose is to highlight how small historical episodes can change the course of a nation's evolution. Thank you and stay tuned.